For the next 31 days on the FCPA Compliance Report, we're going to be bringing you a daily tip, strategy, or idea that you can use to improve your program. Here's your host, Tom Fox, the Compliance Evangelist.
This month's sponsor of 31 Days to a More Effective Compliance program is Affiliated Monitors. Founded in 2004, Affiliated Monitors provides professional, independent integrity monitoring and ethics and compliance assessments nationally and internationally and across almost all industries. With its knowledge of effective ethics and compliance programs and cultures, Affiliated Monitors is respected for its work as the corporate monitor on matters ranging from multinational corporations to small and mid-sized companies and even individuals. Having served in over 750 monitorships, no one has more experience as an independent monitor than the team at Affiliated Monitors. For more information on how an independent monitor can help improve your company's ethics and compliance programs, visit this month's sponsor, Affiliated Monitors, at www.affiliatedmonitors.com. Franchisor compliance. Most franchisors have thorough financial vetting requirements before allowing any person or business to become a franchisee. Yet, how many of these same businesses perform FCPA compliance due diligence on their prospective overseas franchisees? How many U.S. franchisors have FCPA compliance training programs for their international franchisees? How many U.S. franchisors evaluate on an ongoing basis the FCPA compliance program of their overseas franchises? I believe that there is significant liability for U.S. franchisors who engage in the international market. Another way to come at this comes from the book by attorney Aaron Murphy entitled Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, a practical resource for managers and executives. In a chapter entitled You Do More with the Government Than You Think, he has several examples of how any U.S. company doing business overseas will come into contact with a foreign government official and therefore create a possible FCPA exposure. Many of these areas are those which a U.S.-based franchisor would have to utilize to do business in a foreign country. So what are these? Well, interactions with customs officials. Every time your company sends raw materials into or brings them out of a country where there is an interaction with a foreign government official in the form of a customs official. Every customs transaction involves a payment to a foreign government, and every transaction involves some sort of foreign government regulatory process. While the individual payment per transaction may be small, the amount of the total transaction can be quite high if a large volume of goods is being imported into a foreign country. Next, of course, is interaction with tax officials. Interacting with international tax authorities can present problems similar to those with customs officials. The stakes can be much higher since tax transactions may be less in frequency, but higher in financial risks. These types of risks include the valuation of raw materials for VAT purposes, before such materials are incorporated into a final product, or the lack of segregation between goods to be sold on the foreign country's domestic market as opposed to those on which they may be shipped through a free trade zone for sale outside the country's domestic market. Of course, licensing and permits were the bête noire of Walmart in Mexico. Your company is a retailer of clothes or cosmetics or any other services or products. And clearly the FCPA is going to apply to any license or permit. Every physical location in which you sell your goods will require a license to operate the business. And that's true for franchisees as well. And if a franchisee pays a bribe to operate a business in a foreign country and you receive a part of the profits of that business, that may well be enough for FCPA exposure. Work permits and visas. If your company franchises overseas, it will have to send someone from the home office to operate in country at some point. In this post-9/11 world, this means at a minimum your company will have to obtain a visa for each employee who enters the foreign country and probably a work permit as well, or it may well require a visa. And certainly under the Trump administration, visas and work permits are becoming more required for U.S. citizens because of the restrictions put on by the United States government. The visa process can start in the United States with a trip to the foreign government consulate or even the embassy, and at that point you are dealing with a foreign government official. The work permit promise can also begin in the United States but may continue in the foreign country. What about inspections and certifications? Well, Tyson's Food had an FCPA enforcement action around inspections and the bribery of food inspectors, but consider the Tex-Mex restaurant chain that desires to take its cuisine literally across the world. In any city in the world where there will be some type of certification process to enable the business to start operating, and then, of course, there will be a need for ongoing inspections of sanitary conditions. Such inspections may be rare, but if there's slime in the ice machine, it may be grounds to close the restaurant. And if it's grounds to close the restaurant, there may be a request for a bribe to be paid. How could all of this play out for a franchisor? Well, if the franchisor moves into a foreign market, there could be a temptation to grease the skids, and the same could be true of a franchisee. Make payments or other gifts to offer gifts to government officials or their family members to get the permits or permissions necessary to open and operate. In many countries, bribery is a common way of getting business done, and there can be a tremendous pressure from local agents or franchisee candidates to follow regional customs and use bribes to pay or remain competitive. Even if it is not the U.S. franchisee's own employees that engage in the FCPA violations, the FCPA franchisor may still face the risk of an enforcement action if the franchisee's employees engage in such conduct. So what are the steps that a U.S. franchisor can take? Well, fortunately, they're really no different than all of the steps we've been talking about, not only this month, but literally all of this year. So presumably, the franchisor has conducted market research before deciding to enter a market, but you have to go through a due diligence process in researching the background of potential franchisees, master franchisees, and other representatives using a variety of resources. There should be strong FCPA compliance and ethics language and warranties in any franchise agreement, warning against violating the FCPA and, of course, local anti-bribery laws. Franchisors should include contract language which allows for audits and terminations, rights of master franchisees, area representatives, and area developers if red flags or violations are identified. Franchisors may also consider having board or management review of potential FCPA liability decisions. Franchisors must have their own compliance program in place and have a compliance program in place that they're going to put onto their franchisees. A written manual available in hard copy and electronically, obviously tailored to fit the franchisors and franchisees' needs, that educates the franchisees, its employees, agents, and anyone affiliated with the franchise about corruption and anti-bribery and the relevant laws. The franchisor must train franchisees to ensure that franchise employees and their agents are accurately invoicing sales and payments with no hidden fees. After completing the required training of the franchisor's compliance measures, all employees and sub-agents of the franchisees should be certified no less on an annual basis. There must be some type of reporting and monitoring. With each local franchise unit, franchisors must have a point of contact for questions about possible violations, a hotline for anonymous calls, and local monitoring and behavior and accounting. The company should then have a process in which the local franchisee reports the information back to the domestic franchisor. So none of these steps will be new or different, but they clearly need to be tailored for the franchise relationship. So what are today's 3 key takeaways? Well, please do not forget that franchises can bring you an unexpected level of FCPA exposure, and I detailed many of those ways in today's podcast. 2, franchisors must have more than simply financial vetting of potential franchisees. And finally, use your full compliance toolkit for business ventures in managing the FCPA risk for franchises. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. I'd like to thank you again for joining me for this episode of 31 Days to a More Effective Compliance Program around business ventures. And I hope you will join me for our next episode tomorrow. Also, I'd like to shout out to our sponsor, Affiliated Monitors, for sponsoring this month's podcast series. This podcast series on 31 Days to a More Effective Compliance Program is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.